Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. India time or 4:30 GMT and it's 1:30 in Tokyo, where Japan's new Emperor Naruhito formally proclaimed his enthronement in front of royals and leaders from around the world, Imperial Palace at Tokyo's Imperial Palace. Hundreds of the world's top dignitaries are attending this ceremony at the Imperial Palace following Naruhito's coronation. Indian President Ramnath Kovind is also in Japan for this ceremony. Now, in the ceremony at the Seiden State Hall, Abe conveyed felicitations from the floor of the Pine Chamber State Room and led guests in 3 banzai cheers, wishing for the longevity of the emperor. Naruhito became the new emperor of Japan this May, a day after the abdication by his 85-year-old father. Naruhito is the 126th emperor in Japan, which claims to have the oldest continuous monarchy in the world, stretching back 14 centuries. On Friday, the government also announced that about 550,000 petty criminals will be pardoned to mark the emperor's enthronement. Now, Naruhito is the first Japanese emperor to have a university degree. And for more on this developing story, I am now joined by Professor James D.J. Brown, an international affairs expert who is joining us from Tokyo. Welcome and thank you for joining us on Wion World is One. My first question straight up, how big a deal is it really, today's ceremony for Japan and the world at large?
Well, for Japan, without question, this is a huge event. This is very much an event that happens only once a generation. The last time was in 1990, and it really defines an era for Japan when Emperor Naruhito took the throne from his father earlier this year. The clock in terms of the Japanese calendar resets, and so we're now in the first year of a new era, the Reiwa era. Today is also a national holiday in Japan, and many Japanese eyes will be focused on the ceremony that's just coming to a close now in the Imperial Palace. For the wider world as well, it's a reminder of Japan's very distinctive culture, its very long history. And with all of the foreign visitors attending the events today, it's also an opportunity to be, for Japan and its leadership, to be the center of global attention.
Also, Professor Brown, now many are wondering, didn't Naruhito already ascend the throne? So what's special about this enthronement ceremony?
Yeah, so there have been 2 steps to this.
Okay.
So the official handover has actually already occurred. What happened is at the very end of April, the former emperor, Akihito, who was stepping down, he gave up the throne, and the next day, on the 1st of May, you had Naruhito officially taking over. However, that was very much the formal handover, but there was no real announcement, there was no formal ceremony at that time to proclaim the enthronement both to the people of Japan and to the wider world. So that's why you have this second stage of it today, with many of these foreign guests invited. So this is very much announcing, showing to the world that this change has now occurred.
Also, Professor Brown, dignitaries from more than 180-odd countries, including the UK's Prince Charles and Indian President Ramnath Kovind, are in attendance. Now, what will be the enthronement ceremony look like? I mean, we are nearing the end of its ceremony, agreed. But in your estimation, what should one expect going forward as well?
Well, with all of these foreign dignitaries attending, there's also very much the opportunity for this to be a diplomatic and political event. Now, with some of the dignitaries attending, they will simply hold courtesy meetings with Prime Minister Abe, but with some of the visitors, there's more political significance as well. Now, this doesn't really apply to the US side because neither the president nor the vice president is attending, but it is significant when it comes to China and South Korea. The Chinese Vice President Wang Qishan is attending, and also the South Korean Prime Minister Lee Nak-yon is attending, and they're expected to have slightly longer meetings with Prime Minister Abe and to really try and contribute towards stable relations between Japan and its nearest neighbors. So the events are significant for those diplomatic reasons too.
And let's focus a bit on the role of the emperor, which is largely ceremonial, and also focus on public engagement with citizens and meeting foreign dignitaries. So how is Naruhito expected to make a difference as a new age emperor?
So I think it's important to highlight there is the role which is set out for the emperor in the Japanese post-war constitution. And it's a role which is very different from prior to that change when the emperor was very much the heart of the political system. The post-war imperial system is very much about the emperor being the symbol of the state, the symbol of the unity of the Japanese people. And that's very much the role that Naruhito's father performed, and also Naruhito himself is expected to continue. And so what this means is not being involved in politics at all, but really trying to be quite close to the Japanese people and to represent a symbol of them. So what the emperor is often active in doing is visiting different parts of the country, and especially if there's been some disaster, some natural disaster, which unfortunately Japan suffers quite frequently, they will go and visit the people there. And under the previous emperor, Akihito, and what is expected to be the case with the current emperor too, is a much more sort of humble approach, actually kneeling down with ordinary people, sharing in their grief, offering them comfort. So that was something that the previous emperor already did. We're expected to see even more of that from the new emperor, especially because it's seen as somewhat of a more modern couple, especially since the new emperor studied abroad. His wife also is a former diplomat, so we might see a greater closeness to the people.
And Professor Brown, as we watch these live visuals of the enthronement ceremony from Tokyo, I have one last question. It's a two-part question. One, what do you make of the future of monarchy in 21st century? Is it welcome still or not, number one? And number two, we've seen many royals around the world abdicate. Now, we saw that happen in the Netherlands. We saw that happen in India's neighborhood, especially in Bhutan. So what does that speak to you about the UK royals, given the fact that Prince Charles is in attendance there, about Queen Elizabeth II and the British monarchy in general?
Okay, so on the first question, in terms of the future of the imperial family in Japan, especially, that it seems very healthy. It retains enormous support. And the Japanese people appear to be very, very happy with their imperial family. On occasion, there are questions about the amount of money that is spent on certain events, but overall, it seems to be an institution that the Japanese people are very happy to continue to have. The question of longevity, however, is really one to do with succession, because there are very limited numbers of potential successors to the Japanese throne. And in particular, a lot of weight comes on the shoulders of the 13-year-old nephew of the current emperor, because he is the only male potential heir of his generation. So if he were not to have any male children, that, as things currently stand, would be the end of the imperial line. As to your second question, and more broadly, that issue of abdication and how it applies to the UK case, well, yeah, you might imagine that Queen Elizabeth might be considering the example of some of her fellow royals elsewhere in the world. But at the moment, there seems to be no indication of an enthusiasm on her part to stand down, and that has a lot to do with health. In the case of Emperor Akihito, he was suffering from health problems. He had undergone surgery for heart issues, for cancer concerns. That hasn't applied to Queen Elizabeth. And therefore, despite her advanced years, as long as she remains in good health, she seems eager to continue in her current role and not to consider abdication.
And very quickly, Professor Brown, as we're watching Prince Charles on our screens right now as we speak, he's in attendance along with other royals from around the world. Do you think monarchy in today's world, in today's times, militates against democratic polity, multi-party democracy? Do you think it's welcome and should be welcome in many countries around the world?
That's not an easy question to quickly answer. There are many different considerations there.
Where do you stand on this?
Well, my personal opinion which would not be shared by many people within Japan, is that, well, frankly, this is rather an outdated institution. That in democratic countries, in countries where it's supposed to be about meritocracy, having people inherit their positions and their privileges does not seem to sit very naturally with a system where we promote democracy and meritocracy more broadly within society. But as I say, that's just my personal opinion.
All right, on that fascinating note, Professor James D.J. Brown in Tokyo, thank you so much for joining us on Wion Bolivian. Appreciate it. All right, so we are staying with these live visuals on your screens right now, coming from Tokyo, where we are witnessing the enthronement ceremony of the new Japanese emperor. And just to bring our viewers up to speed with all that's happening around the world as we speak, now Japan's new Emperor Naruhito formally proclaimed his enthronement in front of royals and leaders from around the world at the Imperial Palace in Tokyo. As you can see, Prince Charles of the UK is in attendance along with other royals from many countries, including Indian President Ramnath Kovind. Now, hundreds of the world's top dignitaries are attending the ceremony.